Hey, it's Chris, Liege Games. News. Let's do it. Let's do 10 points on the hotness, and we'll do 5 points of what you need to know outside of the Board Game Geek hotness. So a little bit of 10-5, because, I mean, everybody loves 10s, right? Top 10 news of the week, top 10 games, top 10 this, top 5 that, 5 in, 5 in, 5 in, 5 this, whatever. You know what I'm talking about. Everybody else does those. Let's get you a little bit of format here. Let's do this, right? If you missed my video from yesterday, FOMO. The 5 types of FOMO. Huh, look at that segue. That was actually appropriately ironic. Anyway, okay, let's do this. And, you know, like, comment, subscribe, watch my videos, blah, 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 that usual stuff. Anyway, first up is Weather Machine, number 1. Weather Machine is the latest sort of under the radar, hyped for several months now, if not a year plus, game from Lacerda. The next of the heavy games with art from the ever fabulous Ian O'Toole. Now, this is going to be published by Eagle Griffin Games, and this is coming to Kickstarter. Now, the date was recently announced to be on October 28th. So a little bit over 2 months away. And a lot of people were fearing that this one was actually going to be pushed into 2022 by the dearth or the lack of information that had been going on for like the last 6 months. But it appears that we are going to see a little bit of what this entails. And this is looking a little bit intriguing. I won't lie. I am not a heavy worker placement, and that is what Lacerda is known for. But the interesting thing about this game is this 1 to 4 player game is you taking the role as a scientist, where the brilliant, crazy, mad scientist that you are working for has been creating a machine, a weather machine, hence the name of the game, to help control and prevent catastrophes induced by the weather. But each time you run it, bad things happen. And now the worst of all has happened, and you are tasked with stopping things, said weather machine, from causing more problems and ramifications to begin with. And so you can see here, there is going to be a lot going on. There's a lot of iconography. There's a lot of moving parts. Haha, boom, dad joke. And there's just a lot of cool colored variation of heavy interactive or interlocked mechanics going on from that side of things. And it's probably going to be way too heavy for me, but I'm going to check it out because it's kind of a really cool theme at the same time. We haven't really seen anything like it. And so I'm really intrigued from that side of things. And again, you know, it's going to be deluxe probably, and Eagle Griffin Games is going to put a pretty penny price point wise on that. So you got to be aware. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if you're talking anywhere between like $75 to $100. So you just need to be aware. I think you're talking On Mars, the original Kickstarter campaign price point. So have it on your radar, but be aware from that side of things too. Next up, number 2, we have Ankh. Well, I mean, it's just on the Ankh train is rolling. People are getting it. People are selling it. I think there's something like 50 copies right now on Board Game Geek that people are selling, or 30 or something like that. A very good amount. As always, my advice is wait. Find that person who just wants to flip it for the price they paid. If you're very patient, you can usually find one of those or slight markup. But that's my recommendation. The divisive theme is actually the opposite of divisive. The smashing together, the joining of 2 teams at the end of the game to try and play catch up to the leader is the mechanic that seems to have the most people split in terms of whether or not they think it works, whether or not they'd like it, or just does it belong in this side of games. Now, the other interesting point that I touched on before is that people are saying that this as a 2-player game actually may have some merit, as opposed to especially the other 2 in this Eric Lang trilogy, where, you know, area control games like this tend not to do well at 2 players, period. And so this would be the big dichotomy that sets it apart from its predecessors, if that turns out to be the case going forward. Obviously, there's lots of exclusives. Obviously, there's a lot of plastic. And again, the question just is, how much of that other stuff do you need? With the other 2 games, you can make a good argument. You don't need a whole lot of it. But are you a completionist? Is there FOMO? Haha, yesterday's video. And what do you think of it from that side of things? But that is why it's still on the hotness. Next up, we have Dice Realms by Tom Lehman. This is finally getting somewhat of a release date, and it's by Tom Lehman. You may know him from the gentleman whose most recent big hit is Res Arcana, which is probably in my top 10 or if not 15 games of all time at this point. And speaking of that, as a side note, Res Arcana is getting a second expansion. If you didn't know that, it's already listed on the Board Game Geek. Anyway, but this is Dice Realms, where you are going to be making your own dice, sort of like Dice Forge, but done in a more extreme, different manner. Now, the other reason it's getting a lot of clicks right now is because the surprising price point. I think the price point for like online stores is something like $79, $75, right around there, which is massive for a game that we are used to seeing in the $40 to $50 range. And again, is it because you're going to have these dice? Is it going to be because of the components that are going to be along with that, with these customizable dice? That's going to be the question that we really just don't know yet at this point. I mean, look at all these components, right? Look at these dice that you're going to be swapping sides on. I mean, that's the question. And how well is it going to work? I mean, that's a lot of iconography. Again, if you want to talk about iconography with Weather Machine, look at it from Dice Realms. That's not insignificant. And you know, I love me some dice, and you can even see here, we'll blow it up a second here, you can see how these are going to actually fit in the sides of the dice. You can see the little pegs that are going to be in the holes, and you can just imagine how that's going to work. But is it going to work? How well is it going to work? We don't really know right now. This is one I would be high on, but I would also be somewhat reserved because I think it could be very, very great and innovative and the next big thing. Or it could be sort of like the 504 game, if you're familiar with that. 504 ways to play this game. Well, only turns out like 3 of them were really what people wanted to play or that people thought were good. So more is not better, and innovation for the sake of innovation is not better. And so that's going to be the question with a game like this is which one or which side of the fence does that fall on as number 3. Number 4 is going to be The Great Wall, Awaken Realms. Now, if you're not familiar with this, this was the ancient Chinese worker placement dynasty-esque game with asymmetric workers that Awaken Realms put out a couple years ago on Kickstarter at the time, that people were either very high on or very low on, and it seems like people are coming around to the more positive light. Tom Vassell just had his review, which is why it's also getting some clicks right now, and I think his review was overall mostly positive. And the interesting thing with this campaign, as opposed to some of their other campaigns that they did, was although with their other campaigns, they often make the miniatures optional. In this case, they actually gave you an additional option. You could get all the miniatures, or you could get from a meeple side of things. And so you could get just meeples with the advanced resources. Now, the price point was obviously a lot lower at the meeples, and I thought, honestly, it looked really good with the meeples. And so I always am surprised by everyone going the plastic, but the plastic is what sells nowadays, I guess, too. So the question just is, are you in the market for an asymmetric worker placement game with this sort of theme? I don't know. Like, again, the theme is really intriguing to me. The worker placement is not. But again, it's something different. You got to give credit to Awaken Realms for pushing the boundaries. But sometimes, like I said with the other ones, is more always a good thing? That's for you to decide. Number 4. Speaking of controversial and divisive, number 5, still talking about Descent, Legends of the Dark. People are very divided on this. App-driven, price point-driven, experience-driven, fun-driven. People seem to be really enjoying it. I mean, that's what I see on social media. That's what I see in the comments section. It's a price point dilemma. $140. But at the same time, I mentioned this to my Patreon-only video yesterday, exclusive video. Little key insight here. I'll give you some spoilers. Just a little taste. It's very interesting to see how we prioritize and how we dichotomize these two games. Because if you think about a game like this, and you think about a game like Iridia or Edge of Darkness that's on, crowdfunding right now, $140, you can watch a review, you can find the rules, you can talk to people who actually played it, and nauseam, not just, reviewers who got an early copy at this point, and you can see what it actually physically looks like as you play it. Hands-on, almost. As opposed to Iridia or Edge of Darkness, where, especially with Iridia, let's say, $190, there's basically 1 or 2 videos of 1 or 2 people that have outside the studio played it themselves. There's very limited insight into the rule book, into the how to play, onto the what is it actually going to look like, and how nuanced and detailed is it, and are people at the mass going to enjoy it? But yet we always seem to have, or at least on my side of things, I shouldn't generalize for you guys, have a harder time pulling the trigger on this Descent than we do on Iridia, right? That's a whole subject of another video, though. Spoilers, again. So that's why, again, it's still on the hotness. It's going to be there. And the big question, I think, is going to be is, depending on the success of this, how much more is FFG going to be willing to put into this? Because that is going to lead me into the next point. And this is side note number one. This is going to be a completely separate side note as one of my retail side of things, but it's a perfect segue right here. If you were not familiar, FFG, stopped producing Star Wars Armada, which is arguably one of the best war games with a more accessible theme to especially the Star Wars fans, aficionados. Atomic Mass Games took it over, and they say right now on social media, as of August 20, as of 2022 and beyond, they are only going to prioritize reprints and organized play. We do not have any new Armada products in development. That's basically saying you're canceling it without saying you're canceling it, right? And that's a little concerning because they just put out 2 whole separate new factions. They started to get separate factions of the Clone Wars side of things with the Republic, and then with the Separatists. And they're kind of leaving those incomplete. And also, I mean, they say they're going to prioritize reprints, but like, how much? Is it going to start to go out of print? Is there going to be FOMO on that side of things? Like, I still want my Super Star Destroyer, right? I would love that. Holy cow, that would be amazing. But I don't get mine to the table anymore right now anyway. So the question is going to be, what is this going to do to the price point? What is this going to do to the fan base? What is this going to do to the product sales one way or the other? Because this is big. This is going to fly under the radar from a lot of people. But this is big news. This is a big IP. This is a big selling product that's all of a sudden going to be stopped. And, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's not such a big selling product anymore. Maybe that's why. I can't speak to logistics, but that's disappointing to say the least. Especially after we lost Star Wars Destiny, which I never played. But, what are we going to do with all the Star Wars IPs? I mean, you've got to be kidding me right now that the only Star Wars IP out there is going to be X-Wing? Really? Like, take Star Wars and do something great. Come on. I'll toot my own horn here, as a side note here, as the next point, as Cascadia. My review went out last week. Check it out. I think it's going to be one of the best games of 2021. It fits the solo, competitive, as well as family style of games, which as a 1 to 4 player game is really hard to do. It's just a great game. It plays well. This tile laying, animal matching, point scoring, asymmetry, and variability in how you're scoring each of these animals cannot be undersold or understated. Now, again, the end scoring is a little bit of a 7 Wonders cluster, but it's relatively intuitive. You just throw the scoreboard at the one person at the table who does math in their head and can do that thing quickly, and you're fine. But that's on the hotness because everybody's getting it now. That's being delivered to all the backers, and so you're going to see a lot more of it still pop up on social media. You're going to see a lot more of it pop up in the hotness, and reviews pop over on other channels if they cover this sort of thing. This is the perfect middleweight family style game for me. So again, easy pick for one of my top 10s of 2021. I'll tell you that right now, even in the middle of August. So that's why it is from Alderac and Flat Out Games. Next up is Corrosion. This is from Deep Print Games and Stefan Bauer. And this is, again, a very intriguing, very different steampunk-esque concept that we haven't really seen before because it's using the title named Corrosion as a specific mechanic within the game itself. Now, we talk about engine building all the time. You are literally building engines, trying to upgrade them, trying to use them to the maximum efficiency before they corrode. Now, you have 2 main mechanisms of action in this game. One, you are going to be acquiring or playing engineers, which are going to give you more mechanics, more engines and gears in the first place, and more engineers to allow you to utilize your engines in the first place to an even better extent. Now, the second is you are going to be turning the corrosion mechanic. You're going to be turning the crank, which allows you to produce said resources, said things that you're going to need, including, I'm assuming, points. But it causes the corrosion mechanic, which is going to limit and erode how long you can use those machines for. So a very interesting dynamic, very thematically incorporated. And the question is just going to be, okay, when is it actually released? I don't think they have an exact date, but you can head over to the Capstone Games' website where it's up for pre-order right now. I believe it's $45 on pre-order and $75 if you want the deluxe Metal Gears, which I could probably pass on from the aesthetic side of things, but it's going to be a really interesting mechanically. Now, I have not done a lot of the other Deepwater games. They have been a little bit too heavy for me, especially like on the barrage side of things, but it's going to be really interesting to see how this one compares and how heavy it is comparatively, because again, very unique theme, very interesting conceptually, and I kind of want to see how it plays. But again, pre-order at your own risk, because like I mentioned, with some of these, there's just not a lot of information out beforehand, and you're almost better off waiting and kind of letting other people be the test dummies in these situations. So anyway, that is Corrosion. Next up, if you haven't heard about this one, this is Omega Virus. Restoration Games is doing a reprint, a restoration of it to come. Now, they don't give any details on it, and a couple of the larger channels around the interweb have had copies of this prologue standalone card game, sort of to do a little teaser, sort of to generate a little hype. But it's a classic game from Milton Bradley in 1992 released, where there is a virus hidden in this station and you have 35 minutes to find it. And they're going to do it with this. Now, again, how much nostalgia, how much actual good gameplay that's going to translate. Haven't been a huge fan of the last couple games. Restoration Games, I think, especially from the Fireball Island side of things, was a miss for me. But we'll see, because the Dark Tower is coming out and going to be probably... I would assume they're going to wait for that one to hit backers' hands before they sort of set this campaign up to sort of ride the hype on that if it turns out to be as good as people are hoping. But that's what I'd expect. There's not a whole lot of other information, though. But if you're interested, keep an eye out for it, and I'm sure there'll be more information in the future. Now we're going to hop over to Teotihuican. But why are we talking about Teotihuican? That's because Board and Dice officially confirmed and announced another game in the line of Teotihuican. Not another expansion like you may have thought, but Founders of Teotihuican, a tile-laying game. Hopefully a little bit more successful than the previous Founders of game, Founders of Gloomhaven, which all in all wasn't a horrible game as far as I've heard, but definitely did not live up to the hype that people thought it was going to based on the aforementioned title name like it was in this one. So we're going to kind of see a little bit of what's out there, but that's not really a whole lot that's known right now. Now, this has been posted since like March 15, but there really hasn't been a whole lot of news on it from that side of things. So there's just been a little bit more hype on it from that recently. So in case you weren't aware, just something else to check out from that side of things. So if you're familiar with Z-Man games, we're going to talk about a classic here. This is Citadels. Now, this is the revised edition. A couple years ago, they just did a deluxe edition with brand new art, brand new content in a much larger box. Now, what they're doing with this revised edition is you're repackaging it into a more streamlined and, well, portable package. And so tarot-sized cards are now standard cards, and there's a little bit of a 3D crown to pass among players, but they're also trying to make it as affordable as possible. 27 unique characters that can allow sabotage and strategy along the way, and depending on how you want to build your district by laying those district cards, getting your gold however you so choose, and plotting and scheming along your way, you might want to check this out when it is available. It is looking like it is pre-orderable right now for $39 from the Z-Man Games website. If you're a fan of the original, check it out for a more streamlined, updated version. And now let's go completely the other direction. This is the Rocketeer, Fate of the Future, just announced as a new board game that's going to be coming out from the line of Funko games. Two-player asymmetric factions, good versus evil, trying to control the most locations as you play your hand of 6 cards or 6 characters until they're all exhausted, and you go as many rounds as until the Zeppelin gets to the end of the line, signifying the end of the game. Now in the forums, you can see that there is actually a review, a very early review from a Disney all things Disney website. They say it's called Laughing Place, and so they actually run through some of the actual mechanics of the game itself. So if you're interested in the Rocketeer, you're interested in the theme, you're interested in the two-player dueling asymmetric sort of card play, check over to that website and see if that interests you more. Now, I don't think there's a release date, so we'll kind of have to wait and see, but it's a big enough name that it's going to attract some eyes just from that side of things. And with the recent relative success of the Alien Nostromo game and Gargoyles, are we going to see more of that in this style? Especially if Disney sells well from this side of things, you very well may. Another one that we're going to talk about that's sort of lurking in the bottom part of the hotness, but may, sort of pop up if you're paying close attention, or if you go to the top 50 on the hotness, and this is Regicide. And this is a completely different take on things, and I see people being divisive on this on both sides, because And the core of what this game is it's just using a standard deck of playing cards. You don't need anything but the deck of playing cards in the rule set. Now, you can, as they have offered, a whole new set of pictures to go along with the 4 suits. I mean, there's not even a suit change, so it's not even like you have to memorize something. But the concept of this game is you're going to be fighting through successive enemies. I believe it's 12 enemies, and if you can defeat the last king, which is like one of the bad guys, because you'll notice at the bottom here, it goes from 10, you're skipping the jack, the queen, and the king, and so those are the bad guys, the 12 that I just mentioned. If you can defeat the last king, you win. And so what you have to do, though, is that they each do certain damage, and you have to be able to mitigate that based on when you defeat them. And so you have to discard that number of cards, but you have to do them that much of damage in the first place in order to defeat them. So it is a hand management sort of extremely twisted trick-taking style of game, if you want to look at it more from that side of things, if it helps you grasp what they're going for here. And if you run out of cards, you lose. Because that is the gist of the game. And, you know, again, you don't need anything else. And that's where people, you know, are divided. Well, this is just a silly game. I can play it with a deck of cards. Well, this is a great game. You can play it with a deck of cards. You can play it anywhere, with any time, with anything. You don't need anything special. I've seen a couple of people online social media, a couple of people that I respect very much, like Space Biff, commenting that, you know, really enjoying this. So it has some legs, it has some depth, it has some, you know, up here too. So if you're interested on that side of things, definitely check it out, because like I said, you can play it with anything. The rules are on Board Game Geek. They're not like hiding it anywhere. You don't have to pay extra from that side of things. So there you go. Next up, we have Edge of Darkness as well. And Edge of Darkness is on the hotness. It's lurking on the hotness because the Kickstarter campaign for the, I believe, 5th-ish, 4, depending on how you want to quantify them, expansion. And that's because the latest expansion, Emissaries of the Veil, is on Kickstarter. Just under $200,000 funded right now. You've heard me talk about it at other places. Now, again, if you want this game, you're going to have to get it on Kickstarter. I've not seen a lot of secondary copies, because this is so overproduced, and higher price point production side of things end up in a lot of the secondary market. I've not seen it end up just through a lot of the other usual, even, you know, AEG store. So you just need to be aware of that. But this is definitely not a game for everybody. With the card crafting, the worker placement style of things, it is definitely different. It is definitely out there. And again, value-wise, if you want to get this, I mean, it's good value. Compared to the previous Kickstarters, this all-in pledge, essentially, for $189 is a good value. You're saving probably about $50, I'd say, based on, actually, you know, you're probably saving more than that. $50 plus whatever, you're probably saving almost $100 compared to if you were a previous backer that each got the individual expansions and the base game from the previous 2 campaigns. Yeah, you're looking at almost $100 of savings. And again, how does that make you feel? I mean, I personally, again, as a original backer, I don't really care. People got it at a better price than me, so be it. You know, the question is why? Is it having that much trouble selling? You know, you're not really appealing to the previous fan base. Now, you're seeing a lot, 1,600 right now of the 2,300 that are total backing are just getting the expansion. So you're getting your core audience, but you're not really attracting new blood either from that side of things. I mean, look at this. You only have 22 backers at the base game pledge, essentially. Now, again, you have 600 at this level, but not as much as you'd expect. So it's going to be divisive. It's going to be interesting. I can't really speak to what it's adding and if it's adding necessary things or not necessary things. It's just an interesting concept. Also, it hasn't really received a lot of hype. You don't see a lot of the other regular channels covering it. You don't even see a lot of other reviews on it. I mean, especially when you have your #1 quote on here being from 2019. It's just weird nowadays. Like, I'm not sure why, like, AEG's other products haven't gotten this little of hype. I mean, I just don't understand it. And I'm not quite sure why. I mean, yes, there's stuff here, but I don't really think there's any new stuff here. So, video-wise, it just doesn't click with me for some reason. So I'm not seeing the disconnect. I'm not just understanding what's going on. But if you're interested, check it out, because there's only going to be about 3 days left while you watch this video. Last but not least, we have learned about Bruxelles, I'm going to pronounce that completely wrong, 1893 is getting a remake, remastered, re-edition, deluxe edition that's going to be on Kickstarter in sometime the first half of 2022. And details are leaking out about what it's going to entail, and the fact that not only is it going to be remastered, redone in terms of the art, but it's also going to contain an expansion all included within the core box. So especially if they make this deluxe like they're saying, expect a high price point with the expansion included already. This website from Geeky Pen goes over a little bit of the differences and what you're going to see in terms of mechanics and game end goals. So you have a little bit of everything to base it off from that standpoint, as well as what that expansion may entail. If that's of interest to you, if you like the original game that's out there, check this out. Read this blog. I'll put the link in the comment section below. And let me know what you think. That was 10 and 5, right? Totally 10 and 5. Don't count. I stopped counting. You should have stopped counting, because if you've learned anything by now, my framework always goes out the window when I start talking. So hopefully that was interesting. Hopefully that was entertaining. Hopefully you learned a few things. Again, September is probably going to be more of a bull rush than we thought. I thought in August was going to be, but it was sort of the end of July, early August. And we'll just kind of go from there. So otherwise, let me know what you think. Hopefully you had a good weekend. Weekend was relatively uneventful. Back to the grind as it is this week. So hope all is well. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay classy. Have a great time. Thanks for watching.